The air inside the alien warship was heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of metal boots against the floor. The young alien woman, her wrists bound by glowing chains, walked slowly in the line of captives. Her heart raced with every step, for she knew the stories. Those who were captured by the Empire were never free again. They were nothing but slaves, tools, or sacrifices for the cruel masters who ruled the stars. She lowered her eyes, afraid to look at the tall guards beside her. Their armor gleamed cold and sharp under the dim lights, and their voices were filled with commands, not kindness. Around her, other prisoners whispered in trembling voices, some crying, some silent, all broken by fear. Every few steps, the chain around her wrist pulled tight, reminding her of the truth. She was no longer free, and she feared she would never see her home again. The ship's corridors stretched endlessly, like a maze of iron walls. The lights flickered above, casting strange shadows that made the captive shiver. She remembered the moment she was taken. Her people had tried to resist, but the Empire's ships had descended from the sky like monsters. Blinding light, fire, screams, and then nothing but chains. Her family was gone, her village destroyed, and she was left with nothing. The guards finally stopped at a large door, taller than any she had ever seen. It slid open with a hiss, revealing a chamber filled with bright screens and strange devices. The captives were pushed inside one by one, each standing in front of the Council of Commanders. The alien woman's body trembled as she stepped forward. She had heard rumors of what awaited inside. Some captives were sent to work until they died, others were sold, and some were given to humans. Humans, she thought with dread. She had never seen one before, but the stories were enough. They said humans were ruthless, eager to use slaves without mercy. She clenched her fists, preparing for the worst. The commander, a massive alien with cruel eyes, looked down at her as if she were nothing. He spoke in a deep, growling voice, naming her fate. She was not to be sold to the markets, nor sent to the mines. Instead, she was chosen to serve a human officer who had joined the Empire's ranks. Her chest tightened with fear, and her breath shook. A human, she thought this was the end. 2 guards dragged her through another corridor. She tried not to cry, but her eyes burned. Every story, every rumor screamed in her mind. Humans were said to break spirits, to demand obedience until nothing of the captive was left. She thought of her family, of her people, and she whispered a prayer. Perhaps her suffering would end quickly. Perhaps she would not live long enough to remember the pain. The guards opened a smaller door, and she was thrown inside. The chamber was quiet, almost too quiet. She looked up, and there he was, a human, standing in simple clothing, not armor. He was tall, with steady eyes that did not shine with cruelty, but with something else. For a moment, she froze, unsure of what to think. Was this the monster she had feared? Her chains glowed faintly in the dim light as she kept her head low, waiting for him to strike or to command. But no command came. No whip, no harsh voice. Instead, the human stepped closer, slowly, as if not to scare her. He placed something on the floor in front of her, a small piece of bread and a cup of water. Her eyes widened in shock. This was not punishment. This was kindness. But why? The silence stretched between them, heavy with questions. She dared to lift her eyes and saw no hatred there, only patience. He spoke softly, his words calm and strange, but she understood enough. "You are safe here," he said. Her heart raced again, but this time it was not only fear. Could it be true? Could a human be different from the stories? Or was this another trick of the Empire to break her will? She sat trembling, her chains rattling softly. The bread remained untouched before her. Her fear was stronger than her hunger. Yet the human did not force her, did not strike her, did not laugh. He only stepped back, watching quietly, as if giving her a choice. For the first time since her capture, she felt something strange. It was not hope, not yet, but it was a crack in the walls of fear that surrounded her. The chains of fear still held her wrists. But in that moment, She began to wonder. Perhaps destiny was not as cruel as she had believed. The chamber was quiet except for the faint hum of the alien warship moving through the stars. The young alien woman sat on the floor, her glowing chain still tight around her wrists. Her eyes darted between the bread and water placed before her and the strange human who stood only a few steps away. She had prepared herself for cruelty, but instead she was met with silence and patience. The fear inside her battled with confusion, and confusion was almost harder to bear than pain. The human did not move quickly, nor did he raise his voice. He lowered himself slowly, sitting on the floor so that his eyes were level with hers. His gaze was steady, not sharp, not filled with pride like the alien guards who had dragged her here. He looked at her as though she were more than chains, more than a prisoner. But she did not trust easily, for trust had cost her people their freedom. "Eat," the human said softly, his voice calm. She flinched at the sound, though it was not harsh. The words were simple, and she understood them enough. Still, her hand did not move. What if it was a trick? What if the food was poisoned? Her people had always believed humans to be as cruel as the Empire itself. Why would this one be any different? Minutes passed in silence, the weight of her fear pressing against her chest. Finally, the human broke a piece of the bread himself and ate it before her eyes. The simple act left her stunned. No commander, no master would ever share food with a slave. And yet here he was, chewing slowly, then drinking from the same water. When he placed the cup back down, his eyes returned to hers, calm and waiting. It was as if he wanted her to see that he meant no harm. Her fingers trembled as she reached forward, the chain rattling loudly in the silence. She lifted the bread and took a small bite. The taste was plain, but her stomach tightened in relief. She drank the water, only a sip, but enough to cool the dryness in her throat. For a moment, she felt alive again, though fear still clung tightly to her. The human's lips curved slightly, not in mockery, but in something gentler. She had seen smiles before, cruel smiles, mocking smiles. But this one was different. It carried no malice, only quiet reassurance. It unsettled her in a new way. Why would a human care? Why would he risk showing kindness? Did he not fear the Empire's wrath? He spoke again, his voice low, so the guards outside could not hear. "I do not believe in this," he said. His hand gestured to the chains around her wrists. Her breath caught. Did she understand correctly? A human, serving with the Empire, saying he did not believe in slavery. Her mind raced, torn between disbelief and a small spark of hope she dared not feel. He leaned closer, whispering now, "There will be a time, not yet, but soon, when I will help you." Her eyes widened, and the bread nearly slipped from her hands. Help her. The very idea seemed impossible. No one had ever helped her people, not when the Empire burned their homes, not when they were dragged away in chains. Why would human help her now? The human's eyes did not waver. "You must stay quiet," he continued. "No one can know, not the guards, not the commanders, no one." She nodded weakly, though her heart hammered in her chest. Could she believe him? Was this another trick, a test to see if she would betray herself? Or was it something real, something she had prayed for when all hope was gone? Days passed in that chamber. Each time the guards brought her back after cruel inspections or humiliating duties, the human was there. He never shouted, never raised his hand against her. Instead, he offered her water, sometimes even his own share of rations. At first, she thought it was weakness, but soon she realized it was something else. A quiet strength, the strength to be different. Others began to notice. The captives whispered when she passed, whispering of the human who treated his slave as if she were not a slave at all. The guards laughed, calling him soft, but they did not care as long as he did his duties. Still, the whispers grew, and with them, a strange feeling grew inside her, a feeling she had not allowed herself to hold since the day her people were taken. Hope. But hope was dangerous. Hope could be crushed. She knew that at any moment the Empire could decide her fate. Yet when the human looked at her, when his voice whispered of freedom, she felt her fear weaken. The chains still bound her wrists, but in her heart, a new bond was forming. A silent bond between slave and human, between fear and defiance. She did not understand it, and yet she could not ignore it. One night, when the warship drifted through endless stars, she lay awake on the cold floor. The guards outside laughed in their own tongue, their voices cruel and careless. She turned her head and saw the human watching her quietly. His eyes reflected the faint glow of the chains. And in that silence, without words, she felt something stir. A question, a promise, a destiny she had never imagined. For the first time since her capture, she closed her eyes not in despair, but in the fragile comfort of knowing that perhaps she was not as alone as she thought. The days stretched on, and the alien woman felt time blur together inside the warship. Every corridor looked the same. Every door hissed open and closed with the same cold sound. The chains around her wrists had become part of her body, glowing softly even when she tried to sleep. Yet something had changed, something she had not expected. The human who watched over her was no longer a figure of fear, but a strange puzzle, a mystery she could not solve. Each time he brought food, each time he shielded her from the guard's harshness, her doubts grew weaker. He spoke little, always careful, always glancing toward the doors as if the very walls had ears. But when he did speak, his words lingered inside her. Words like freedom, words like choice. Things she had not dared to imagine since her capture. One night, when the ship was quieter than usual, he crouched beside her and whispered. "There are others," he said, his voice low. Her eyes widened, her heart quickened. "Others." She leaned closer, desperate to hear. "There are other humans," he continued. "Not many, but a few, who do not follow the Empire's cruelty." His gaze hardened, his whisper fierce. "They want to resist, they want to fight back, but we cannot do it alone." She trembled, not only from fear but from the weight of his words. Resistance, rebellion, freedom. They were dangerous ideas, deadly ideas. If the Empire even suspected, both of them would be executed without question. Yet the way he spoke lit something inside her chest, something she thought was buried with her people. She whispered back, her voice trembling. "Why tell me?" The question was sharp, full of suspicion. Why would a human trust her? A slave, a captive who could betray him with one wrong glance. The human looked at her with steady eyes. "Because you are stronger than you think," he answered. Her chains rattled softly as she drew back in disbelief. Strong, she thought. How could she be strong when she had lost everything? He leaned closer, his voice almost fading into the hum of the ship. "There will be a chance," he said, "a moment when we can act, but you must be ready." Her lips parted, but no words came. Ready. The very idea filled her with both dread and strange excitement. Was it possible that destiny was not only pain? Was it possible that even within chains she could choose? The days that followed were filled with a new kind of tension. Every glance at the guards felt heavier. Every shadow seemed to hide secrets. She watched the human carefully, noticing the way he memorized the patrols, the way he studied the doors, the way he always carried something hidden in his pocket. He was not only her keeper, he was planning, always planning. And now she was part of his secret, whether she wished it or not. The whispers between them grew stronger. Late at night, when the guards grew lazy, he spoke of star maps and hidden passages. He told her of human ships that still fought far away, of battles lost and won. He told her that not all humans bowed to the Empire, that some still dreamed of freedom. And each story felt like a spark, lighting a fire deep in her heart. Yet with every spark came fear. What if the fire grew too bright? What if it drew the eyes of their masters? One evening, after a brutal inspection by the alien commanders, she returned to the chamber broken and sore. The guards had mocked her, pulling at her chains, calling her worthless. Her body ached, but her spirit burned. The human saw her pain and said nothing at first, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. Then, when the guards were gone, he whispered with a voice of steel, "This is why we fight." Her eyes lifted, and for the first time, she saw not only kindness in him, but fire. A fire that mirrored her own, though hers had been buried in ashes. She whispered back, "If we try, we will die." The human's eyes did not waver. "If we do nothing, we are already dead," he replied. The words cut deep, sharp and true. She closed her eyes, hearing again the screams of her people, the fire, the chains. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps she was already dead the moment the Empire took her freedom. But if death was certain, then perhaps she could choose how it came. From that day, the silence between them changed. It was no longer the silence of strangers, no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence of conspirators, of two beings bound by chains but dreaming of breaking them. She still feared the Empire, still feared betrayal. But she also feared something else now, something unfamiliar. She feared the hope that grew stronger with each whisper. Hope that one day she would not walk these corridors in chains, but in freedom. The whispers of rebellion echoed in her mind long after he stopped speaking. And though she tried to bury them, they returned again and again. Whispers of rebellion, whispers of destiny, whispers that one day the chains of fear would break. The warship drifted across the stars like a predator in the night, its engines humming with endless power. Inside its cold halls, silence wrapped itself around the captives, pressing against them like another chain. The alien woman sat in her chamber, her wrists still bound, her body weary from labor, but her mind restless. The whispers of rebellion had not left her. They echoed inside her chest with every breath. And each time she met the human's eyes, the whispers grew louder. He had become more than a figure in the shadows, more than a captor. He was a puzzle, one she studied with caution. He never treated her as property, never raised his hand against her. Instead, he gave small gestures of kindness, gestures so simple yet so powerful in a place where kindness was forbidden. A shared piece of food, a shield from the guard's blows, a word of comfort when her strength began to falter. It was strange how silence could speak louder than words. In the beginning, she had feared his gaze, expecting cruelty, expecting the same hunger for power she saw in the Empire's soldiers. But now, when his eyes met hers, she felt something else. Not control, not ownership, but recognition. As if he looked at her and saw more than a prisoner, more than a slave in chains. The bond between them grew quietly, like a seed hidden in the soil. Neither of them spoke of it, neither dared to give a name. But it lived in the way he handed her water before he drank himself. It lived in the way she lowered her head slightly, not in fear, but in gratitude she could not say aloud. And though they lived surrounded by enemies, by guards who laughed at suffering, by walls that echoed with despair, that bond gave them both a strange kind of strength. One night, when the ship's corridors were quieter than usual, the human sat across from her. The dim glow of the chains painted his face in pale light. For a long moment, neither spoke. She watched him, wondering what he saw in her, wondering why he risked kindness when cruelty was so much easier. Then he whispered, his voice almost lost in the hum of the engines. "They believe chains make us weak," he said, "but sometimes chains only make us stronger." She tilted her head, not sure what he meant. He gestured softly to her wrists, then to his own hands. "They think you're broken," he continued, "but I see someone still standing, still breathing, still refusing to bow inside." Her chest tightened, and she looked away. Could it be true? She had thought herself broken, her spirit crushed under the Empire's cruelty. But when he said those words, she felt something stir, a part of her that had not died after all. Their silence after that was heavier, but not empty. It was filled with unspoken things, with trust that had not been named. She began to notice his presence in new ways. The way his footsteps softened near her, the way his shoulders tensed when guards mocked her, the way his voice grew gentle when speaking only to her. And she hated herself for feeling it, but she did. The bond between them was no longer only survival. It was becoming something deeper, something she dared not understand. When other captives whispered about him, she listened quietly. Some said he was weak, too soft to last in the Empire's army. Others said he had gone mad, treating a slave as if she mattered. But she knew the truth was something else. He was not weak. He was choosing strength in a different way. And it was that choice that tied her fate to his, tighter than any chain could. The Empire could not see it. The guards could not feel it. But between the two of them, something was growing stronger than fear. Every whisper of rebellion now carried the warmth of trust. Every dangerous plan now carried the weight of loyalty. They were still captor and captive, still slave and human. But in the silence they shared, the line blurred. In that silence, they were allies, they were equals, they were something neither had words for. Late one night, when exhaustion pressed heavy on her body, she closed her eyes and listened, not to the hum of the ship, not to the laughter of the guards, but to the steady sound of his breathing nearby. It calmed her more than any words could. For the first time in many nights, she slept not with fear in her chest, but with a fragile comfort. A comfort born of the silent bond that tied her to the human who dared to defy the Empire. The warship cut through space like a blade, silent and merciless. But inside its cold heart, two prisoners of fate were no longer waiting to be broken. The alien woman, once trembling in chains, now listened to every whisper from the human with sharp attention. The bond between them had grown strong, and now it was time for that bond to face its first true test. He had been studying the ship for weeks. Every patrol of the guards, every flicker of the lights, every moment the commanders grew careless. His memory was sharp, his patience unshaken. And now, at last, he leaned close to her in the dim glow of the chamber and whispered the words that made her heart freeze. "It is time." Her eyes widened, her chest tightened. Time for what? He reached into his clothing and pulled out a small device, no larger than his hand. Its lights blinked faintly, hidden by his palm. "This will unlock part of the security grid," he said, "but I cannot reach the inner doors alone." He looked at her wrists, at the faint glow of her chains. "They designed these walls with your people's symbols, your codes. Only you can open them." Fear rushed through her, as sharp as the day she was first captured. To act against the Empire was death, certain and swift. But then she remembered his words. "If we do nothing, we are already dead." Her chains rattled softly as she shifted closer, her voice no more than a whisper. "What must I do?" He outlined the plan quickly, his voice steady but urgent. They would move when the guards changed shifts, a window of only a few minutes. She would use her ability to unlock the sealed chamber deep within the ship. Inside, the core systems pulsed, guarded but not impenetrable. If they reached it, he could disable the ship's control grid, if only for a short time. It would be chaos, but chaos was the only path to freedom. Her hands trembled as she listened. The Empire was merciless, its ships unbreakable, its soldiers unyielding. And yet here he was, speaking as though it could fall with their hands alone. She looked at him and saw not only defiance, but faith. Faith in her, a faith she did not even hold in herself. The moment came quickly. The guards outside the chamber yawned and muttered, their voices fading as they moved to change positions. The human gave her a single nod, sharp and certain. Her heart thundered as he pressed the device against her chains. There was a flash of light, a hiss of energy, and the bindings shattered. For the first time since her capture, her wrists were free. She touched the raw skin where the metal had burned, and the shock of freedom nearly stole her breath. "Move," he whispered, and together they slipped into the corridor. The lights above flickered faintly, the hum of the engines masking their steps. Every shadow felt alive, every corner a trap. Her body shook with fear, but her legs carried her forward, guided by his presence beside her. For once, she was not walking alone. They reached the sealed chamber, its door towering above them, etched with the symbols of her people. Her throat tightened as she touched the markings. It was as if the walls remembered her, remembered the voices of those who had built them before the Empire enslaved them. Her hands moved across the surface, and the door responded with a low groan, sliding open. Inside, the core pulsed with light, massive and alive, like the heart of a beast. But danger came quickly. The sound of boots echoed through the halls, shouts rising as the guards realized something was wrong. The human pressed the device into her hand, his eyes fierce. "Do it now," he urged. "I will hold them off." She froze, fear choking her. "Alone," she whispered. He shook his head, his jaw set. "You are not alone, not anymore." Then he turned, placing himself between her and the approaching guards. Blades and weapons gleamed in the distance. Footsteps thundered, alarms blared. She pressed her hands against the console, her mind racing to remember the patterns, the codes of her people. Her breath came fast, her body trembled, but the bond between them gave her strength. She pressed the final symbol, and the core screamed with energy. Lights flickered, alarms howled, and the ship shook as systems collapsed. Behind her, the human fought with wild determination. Every strike was desperate, every move defiant. And though he was outnumbered, he did not fall. His defiance was fire, and that fire gave her the courage to finish. The systems fell dark, the guards shouted in panic, and the ship roared with chaos. She turned back to him, her voice breaking. "It is done." His face, bloodied but unbroken, lit with something fierce. "Then we run," he said, and for the first time, she believed they could. The warship trembled like a wounded beast, alarms screaming through every corridor. Red lights flashed against steel walls, turning every shadow into a warning. The alien woman's heart pounded as she stumbled after the human, her chains broken, her wrists raw but free. Behind them, guards shouted, their footsteps crashing against the metal floors like thunder. The Empire had discovered the breach, and now the entire ship was hunting them. The human moved with fierce determination, his every step steady despite the chaos. He carried no great weapon, only the fire of defiance burning inside him. She followed, fear gripping her body, yet something stronger pushed her forward. She had been a slave, a prisoner with no voice, but now she was running for freedom, and each step beside him felt like destiny refusing to bow. The corridors twisted like a maze, doors sliding shut as the ship tried to trap them. "Here," he shouted over the blaring alarms, pulling her through a narrow passage. The air was hot, thick with smoke from damaged systems. The ship groaned as if alive, its wounded heart struggling to keep control. She coughed, her vision blurring, but his hand steadied her, guiding her forward. At last they reached the engine decks. The heat was unbearable, flames licking the walls where sparks had burst free. Metal groaned as the systems collapsed. Guards poured into the chamber, their weapons raised, their eyes burning with fury. The human pushed her behind a broken pillar, his voice firm. "Stay low," he whispered. "I'll clear the way." She shook her head, fear twisting inside her. "There are too many," she whispered. But his eyes blazed with a fire she had never seen. "Then we fight anyway," he answered. He lunged forward, grabbing a fallen weapon from the floor. Blaster fire lit the air, filling the chamber with smoke and thunder. The alien woman pressed herself against the wall, her body trembling. She wanted to close her eyes, to shut out the terror, but something inside her would not let her. Not after everything, not after the whispers of rebellion, not after the silent bond that had grown between them. Her people had once been warriors, builders, dreamers. The Empire had stolen that from her, beaten it into silence. But as she saw him fight, as she saw the human stand against the impossible, that part of her awoke. She crawled from her cover and seized a metal shard torn from the wreckage. Her hand shook, but her heart did not. When a guard rushed toward the human from behind, she struck. The shard cut deep, and the guard fell, his weapon clattering to the floor. The human glanced at her, surprise flashing in his eyes. But he gave no words, only a sharp nod of respect. In that moment, she was no longer a burden, no longer a slave he had to protect. She was his ally. Together they fought, each blow an act of defiance, each breath a step closer to freedom. The guards fell back as the chaos spread, the ship groaning under its own failing systems. Sparks burst overhead, flames roared, and the floor shook violently. "The escape pods," the human shouted, pointing toward a hatch at the far end of the chamber. Her chest tightened, hope surging through her veins. Freedom was only steps away, but the Empire would not let go so easily. The largest of the guards, armored in black steel, blocked the path. His weapon glowed, his voice a roar of command. "No slave leaves this ship alive." The alien woman froze, terror flooding her. But the human stepped forward, his body battered, his face bloodied, his spirit unbroken. "Then you will fall with it," he answered. The fight was brutal, sparks and steel clashing in the smoke-filled chamber. The human fought with everything left in him, his body moving not with strength alone, but with will. The alien woman's heart raced as she saw him falter, the enemy's blade nearly striking true. And in that moment, she leapt forward, her shard piercing through the enemy's armor where it was weakest. The guard roared and fell, the path clear at last. The human caught her arm, pulling her toward the hatch. Together they stumbled through, alarms still howling, the warship tearing itself apart. The escape pods waited, small and fragile compared to the giant vessel around them. He pushed her inside first, then climbed in after her. The hatch sealed, the systems hummed, and with a violent shudder, the pod launched into the void. Through the small window, she saw the Empire's warship burning, flames tearing through its body. It was a monster dying in the darkness, a beast collapsing under its own cruelty. She pressed her hands against the glass, her breath shaking. The chains were gone, the ship was behind her. For the first time, she felt the weight of freedom, raw and real. The human leaned back, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. But when his eyes met hers, she saw no regret, no fear, only the same fire that had carried them through the storm. And in that fire, she saw a truth greater than chains. They had escaped, not because they were stronger, but because they had chosen to stand together. The escape pod drifted into the endless sea of stars, small and fragile against the vast darkness. Inside, silence wrapped around them, broken only by the soft hum of the pod's systems. The alien woman sat with her back pressed against the cold wall, her wrists raw where the chains had once cut into her skin. She touched them gently, still in disbelief, still struggling to accept that the shackles were gone. For so long, she had thought her fate was sealed, that slavery and suffering would be her only path. But now, she floated free, with a human who had shattered the destiny the Empire tried to write for them. The human leaned back, his body battered from the fight, blood drying along his jaw, his breaths heavy but steady. Yet his eyes, when they met hers, were calm, steady as the stars outside. He had risked everything, not only for his own freedom, but for hers. And though words felt too small, she whispered softly, her voice trembling. "Why me?" His gaze did not falter. "Because you were never meant to be a slave," he said. "Because no one is." The words struck deep, breaking through the walls of fear she had built around her heart. She lowered her head, tears stinging her eyes. Her people were gone, her home destroyed, her future stolen. Yet in that moment, with him, she felt something she had not felt in so long. She felt seen. Outside the pod's window, the Empire's warship burned in the distance. It was falling apart, flames consuming its steel body as it drifted powerless into the void. She watched it with wide eyes, a symbol of her suffering collapsing into ruin. It was not the end of the Empire, she knew that, but it was a beginning, a spark, a reminder that even the strongest chains could break. For a long time, neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer heavy with fear. It was filled with something new, something fragile, yet powerful. Trust. It had been born in whispers, fed by kindness, and forged in battle. Now it bound them stronger than any chain. Finally, the human spoke, his voice low but firm. "We are not safe yet," he said. "This pod will drift until we reach a safe zone, but the Empire will search." She nodded, wiping her eyes quickly. The fight was not over, perhaps it never would be, but she was no longer afraid to face it, not with him beside her. She studied his face, the scars, the exhaustion, the fire that refused to die. He was not like the stories told by her people, not the monster she had feared. He was proof that destiny was not written by the Empire, nor by chains. Destiny was written by choice, by courage, by the will to stand even when the universe demanded surrender. Slowly, she whispered, "What now?" The human leaned forward, his eyes steady. "Now we live," he said, "not as captives, not as slaves, but as free souls." She let out a shaky breath, the weight of his words sinking deep. Free. It felt impossible, yet here she was, sitting in the silence of freedom. Her tears fell silently, not of despair, but of release. She thought of her people, of those who had been lost, of those still trapped in chains. And though grief pressed against her chest, hope rose higher. Because if freedom was possible for her, it could be possible for them too. The thought burned inside her like a promise. One day, she would return. One day, she would fight for them as he had fought for her. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, shining brighter than she had ever seen. Each one a reminder that the universe was vast, and within its endless reach, destiny could change. She turned her head toward the human, her voice soft but certain. "You changed my fate," she whispered. He shook his head, a faint smile touching his lips. "No," he said, "you changed your own." The silence that followed was not empty. It was the silence of two souls who had defied destiny. The silence of a bond unbroken, stronger than fear, stronger than chains. And as the pod drifted deeper into the sea of stars, the alien woman knew one truth. She was no longer enslaved, no longer afraid. She had found freedom, and with it, a new destiny.